This is Arkansas 11, KTHV Little Rock.
Closing arguments have concluded in the Benny Ray Hatley capital felony murder trial, and the case will go to the jury later this afternoon. During his closing argument, defense attorney Joe Peacock told the jury if it finds Hatley guilty, the 17-year-old defendant should not be punished for capital murder. Capital murder requires premeditation to be charged with the crime. Peacock said the state did not prove premeditation, and that if Hatley did kill 2 cotton plant police officers last July 13th, he did it out of impulse. The defense attorney said the highest charge Hatley should receive, if convicted, is second-degree murder or manslaughter. And Peacock said Hatley's confession given the morning after the shootings was not credible because the young man was retarded and illiterate. But prosecutor Gene Raff said the evidence was clear and that the best piece of that evidence was Hatley's own confession. The jury must first decide guilt or innocence, and if it convicts Hatley of capital murder, the jury will have to reconvene to decide whether the defendant will receive the death penalty or life in prison without parole. At the Woodruff County Courthouse, Larry Brannon, 11 Action News, Augusta.
Governor Bill Clinton proclaimed today as Families of Missing Children Day. The problem of missing children has recently been spotlighted by Attorney General Steve Clark.
We chose February 14th, Valentine's Day, for the obvious reason. We're asking you to open your heart and say a prayer for a missing child and the often forgotten family of that child.
Appropriately, a Connecticut-based company chose this day to announce its arrival in the state. The Secure 24 Child File bills itself as an identification, registration, and protection service. It features a computer hookup and a 24-hour hotline.
If you're off in Disneyland somewhere and you lose your child or have a medical emergency, you simply call the number, and this information is only minutes away from any law enforcement agency or child find center or hospital in the country.
Along those same lines, a new packet called Kids Prints is being distributed in the Little Rock area. Clark says his office has talked on the phone with the organizers of both of the new programs.
There are a lot of people moving into the field. I don't know of anything negative involving either one of those two companies, except I can tell you they are in the business for profit.
Arkansas's increased public awareness of missing children is paying off. The State Crime Information Center now reports 26 children are missing in Arkansas. That number is up from last January when only 17 cases were on file. Ann Jansen, 11 Action News, Little Rock.
It took 4 hours, but at 4:25 this afternoon, the jury in the Benny Ray Hatley capital felony murder trial came back with a guilty verdict for the July 13th shooting deaths of 2 cotton plant police officers. As the verdict was read, 17-year-old Hatley hung his head and showed little other emotion. But outside the courtroom, Hatley's mother wept and had to be led away by family and friends. The jury will reconvene at 10 in the morning to decide whether Hatley will receive the death penalty or life in prison without parole. During closing arguments today, defense attorney Joe Peacock had tried to convince the jury that if Hatley had killed the 2 officers, he did so impulsively without premeditation. The state had to prove premeditation for the capital felony charge, and during his closing arguments, prosecutor Gene Raff said the state's case had been clear and that the best piece of evidence was a confession Hatley had given to police officers the morning after the shootings occurred. Hatley did not speak to the press as he was led away, and prosecutor Raff said he would have no comment until after tomorrow's penalty phase. Defense attorney Peacock has said he will appeal the verdict. At the Woodruff County Courthouse, Larry Brannon, 11 Action News, Augusta.
New Year's Eve, 1984, a toxic chemical spills in a North Little Rock rail yard. 2 hours after it was discovered by MOPAC, state officials are notified. 12 hours later, 2,500 residents are evacuated. A procedure that displeased many. It was an issue before a hearing at the Capitol where a measure to require better public disclosure was debated.
I was exposed to the ethylene oxide in North Little Rock.
Ann Smith says she and others who worked near the spill tried to find out if the fumes were toxic, calling police, fire, and Office of Emergency Service officials between 1 and 3 that afternoon.
Every one of these agencies only knew that the chemical could explode if it ignited. None of them knew that the fumes were toxic.
Smith, a marathon runner, claims she now suffers from a low white cell count and an elevated liver function. The director of pollution control maintains the evacuation was based upon potential explosion, but admitted there was a toxic level risk.
The calculations we had done, we felt that our imaginary zone of safety within that yard was accurate, and as long as our workers and any other individual, whether it be a firefighter or a citizen, did not come within that zone, that there was not the problem of toxic exposure.
Meanwhile, sponsors of the bill to better inform the public of health risk from hazardous materials plan to bring the bill back up for vote next week. At the state capitol, Mike Browning, 11 Action News.
We, the jury, find Benny Ray Hatley guilty of capital murder, signed with Jan David Kerbo, foreman. Jury verdict in case number CR 8459. We, the jury, find Benny Ray Hatley guilty of capital murder.
17-year-old Benny Ray Hatley showed little emotion as the verdict was read, but outside the courtroom, his mother wept and was later led away by family and friends. After closing arguments were heard, defense attorney Joe Peacock told the jury that the state had not proved there was premeditation in the July 13th shooting deaths of 2 cotton plant police officers. Peacock said Hatley was retarded and illiterate and suggested if Hatley did shoot the officers, he acted on impulse.
But did Benny Ray bring a gun with him? Did he come up there? Did he plan? Did he scheme? Did he want to kill those police officers? His own testimony, his own statement to Officer Bill Gage was that he was sorry that it happened. He broke down crying. He said he broke down crying as soon as it happened.
Peacock also suggested that if former police chief Leonard Cross and Officer Roy Leon had handcuffed Hatley when he was arrested on a stolen motorcycle charge, the whole incident may never have happened. But prosecutor Gene Raff had this countering argument.
He wasn't handcuffed. Does that give this defendant the right, because he's not handcuffed, to grab the chief's gun and shoot him in the groin with it and leave him there in a pile of mosquitoes to bleed and die to death?
Outside the courtroom, as the jury was deliberating, former police chief Leonard Cross's wife said she wanted Hatley to receive the death penalty. And when asked what type of support she had received from the community since her husband's death, she had this comment.
None whatsoever. They have not helped us through nothing.
Are you bitter about that?
Yes, I am. I sure am.
The jury will reconvene in the morning to decide whether Hatley will receive the death penalty or life in prison without parole. Larry Brannon, 11 Action News, Augusta.
Whit and Jack Stevens grew up on the farm, but that didn't stop them from catapulting to the top of America's financial industry. They could have gone to Wall Street, but instead chose to stay in Arkansas. Today, Jack Stevens says that choice has had its costs.
Well, it's hurt, but it's had a lot of pluses, too. The big plus is that we're happy, and I think that's essential if you're going to be successful.
Some people say one reason for their success are values of hard work learned on the farm, but Stevens says it was more like the fear of the hard life.
I didn't particularly want to make a career out of farming, and that's one reason I've worked so hard in Little Rock to keep from farming. And I'd hate to think what condition would be if I were still a farmer today.
Stevens says financial woes of our farmers represents a serious problem for our state and economy. And today he expressed those fears to some of the state's top businessmen after receiving 2 awards from the Little Rock Rotary Club. Stevens says we are spending time, money, and effort to attract new industry, while farmers go broke.
We get hung up in industrialization, etc., and we forget them. And I think it'd be good if we just all let them know that anything that we'd like to help.
Stevens says he doesn't know the answers, but he says it'll do farmers good to know we hope they make it. Chris Curtis, 11 Action News, Little Rock.
That was it. That was the attraction, pulling 45,000 pounds of weight as far as they can get it.
Over 7,000 fans packed Barton Coliseum on the opening night of the TNT Truck and Car Pull. So there had to be something other than seeing the 9-ton weight being pulled out to the middle of the Coliseum.
Well, the noise,
excitement of blowing engines, anything comes along with it.
Is that the highlight of the night when it blows an engine?
I would say so.
What brings you out here?
I'm out here to see all the truck and the good-looking men.
And then there are those that aren't sure why they came out.
I don't know. I'm coming to watch yours. I like them.
What's the attraction?
Sir?
What's the attraction?
I don't know.
The attraction to the drivers is simple enough. Money. The winners can take home nearly $1,000 a night. Not bad. But when it takes $40,000 to $60,000 to build a hot rod, it sounds like a drop in the bucket. So you might not see the results of the TNT circuit along with the basketball scores in the newspaper, but one of the loudest sports happens to quietly be one of the most popular. In Little Rock, this is Gary Hogan for 11 Action Sports.
And I'm going to now join with you and agree with you that Benny Ray Hatley is a killer that y'all all decided yesterday. Yes, he's a killer now. Now, what we've got to decide today is what we're going to do with him.
That was how defense attorney Joe Peacock began his arguments in the final day of 17-year-old Benny Ray Hatley's capital felony murder trial. Prosecutor Gene Raff had sought the death penalty for Hatley, who was convicted by a circuit jury for murdering 2 cotton plant police officers. But Peacock begged the jury for mercy. He quoted scriptures and told the jury if it sentenced Hatley to death, it would be on the conscience of each member for the rest of their lives.
When he's put on that table, strapped down, and he's dead, and he's put in that casket, and he's rolled out to that cemetery, and he's buried, it'll be on your conscience, and when you die, God will make that decision. Thank you very much.
Apparently, Peacock's arguments worked, and after almost 4 hours of deliberation, the jury came back with its verdict.
Reads, we, the jury, after careful deliberation, have determined that Benny Ray Hatley shall be sentenced to life imprisonment without parole, signed by all 12 jurors.
That decision came despite these arguments by prosecutor Gene Raff.
The truth of who sends Benny Ray Hatley to a just punishment under the law of man and God is but one person, and that person is Benny Ray Hatley himself. Look at him, ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
Hatley showed very little emotion throughout the trial, but his mother fell into the arms of friends after the sentence was read and quickly left the courtroom without speaking. Later, after the sentencing, both attorneys assessed the trial.
I'm pleased that they returned a verdict of guilty of capital murder in each of these cases, and that the judge saw fit to run those consecutively.
So today, it was certainly a victory today, because that was the best we could hope for. It was life without parole.
Defense attorney Peacock has said he will appeal. He must do so within 30 days to the Arkansas Supreme Court. Larry Brannon, 11 Action News, Augusta.
This is Cotton Plant, the town where it all began. Word of the sentence, life without parole, reached residents late this afternoon. Reactions were mixed. One store manager said a lot of questions about the case remain unanswered, and the sentence was unfair.
I think they were bloodthirsty. Just want to put something on somebody and want to be washed up. I think they're covering up something, really. I don't believe that the whole truth going to come out and somebody tell them exactly what happened. They was down there and saw it. That's the way I believe. I believe the boy was done injustice, really.
Another resident whose daughter testified at the Hatley trial said she wasn't satisfied with the outcome either.
I don't think the trial should be over with.
Why not?
It don't seem like all the evidence was there. You know, it seemed like that it need to be reopened or something. You know, I don't think he should have got life without parole.
Meanwhile, another woman who knew the slain police chief, Leonard Cross, said Hatley's sentence wasn't tough enough.
If he is guilty, I feel that it's a waste of taxpayers' money to send him to prison for life when he should actually get death.
As night fell on this small farming community, many cotton plant residents still did not know about the late afternoon sentencing. It was in front of this house that the killings took place last summer, and ever since then, Cotton Plant has been the subject of media attention. But residents here this afternoon say they'll willingly give up that notoriety. They're ready to put away the memories of that violent and sad summer evening. Jeannie Norton, 11 Action News, Cotton Plant.